episode 35 with Michelle Wright. I've been looking forward to this one for a few days, and it turned out really great. Enjoyed the conversation a lot. My co-host once again, Mr. Brian Edwards, and we had some great conversations. Brian goes back a long ways with Michelle, and we talked about the good old days and everything that's happening now. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Sit back, relax, enjoy Michelle Wright. And we're doing a little FaceTime video with Michelle, and Brian Edwards is joining again as a co-host, and lovely to have all of you here amongst this crazy COVID time. And it's kind of neat now that we have a chance to sit down and have more time during the day and being able to do these conversations. And but it certainly is a time now that's it's stressful for everybody. I think we all go through times where we're feeling happy to be home, happy to be with loved ones and all that, but then you get that stress of what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen the week after that, or what's going to happen a month from now. So how are you feeling, Michelle, on things as you're sitting in Nashville? You're in Nashville, right?
Yep. Well, that is sort of an interesting way of putting it, of expressing it, because on one hand, it's just like, well, this is cool, everybody's sort of, I can stay very focused on certain tasks around the house and not even think about anything outside of the home right now. And then on the other hand, just feel stressful and concerned and sad and, I so generally speaking, and I know that, so, one of the things I think about is I know that for me and for our household, that Marco and I, you can't let yourself get caught up too much in that swirl, because we're no good to one another, or even to just sort of the world out there if we start falling apart over here. So I've had a couple of days of real, wow, this is really going down, isn't it? This is really serious and really heavy. And then snap out of it and try to get stuff done and be a positive piece of energy out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I discovered dry shampoo for the first time.
That is
See, it's a plus.
My mother used to use that when I was a kid, and it's been a while since I've used it, but it is a handy little tool to have around, isn't it?
It was funny this morning. I figured, well, I don't have to wash my hair every day. I just try this dry shampoo stuff. Yeah. And I went to my bathroom counter and I just did a thorough cleaning of everything in this whole house. And as I'm sure everyone's been doing.
Yes.
And then I go to my counter and I'm looking, why is my counter so dusty? It was thick of dust. As I'm spraying this dry shampoo in my hair to see if it works. And then I realized it's all this sediment from this dry shampoo stuff that's making me look like I haven't cleaned my bathroom. So,
well, I love what you're saying about the cleaning, because yesterday our master bathroom got the toothbrush cleaning. I had the toothbrush. And of course, when I was all done, I brought Marco in last night and went, look at this, it's sparkling everywhere. I'm a bit of a clean freak to begin with, but this time of year always is spring cleaning time, so it's kind of falling at the right time, at least. Yeah.
I did the same thing in my bathroom. Put a nice stone wall against the one edge of the shower, and it looks great. But after a while, you realize it's not a smooth surface; it's all rough, and everything just gathers up. So I started looking at it. It's like, oh, I got to get the steamer. I had the steamer and the same thing, and the brush. And it's like, I can't believe how dirty this is. Like 3 hours later, I was exhausted. But it's done. When do you have time to do that? So now you do.
Yeah, exactly.
As we think about all of this going around the world, part of it brings out a lot of good things in people, especially what you're talking about there. It's never bad to be overly clean. I know, we're touring the road the way we do. We certainly see a lot of things that are not necessarily polished all the time. So maybe some of these situations are going to change towards the good, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, some of these venues that we've worked in high schools and God knows what else,
Right.
and the bar scenes and all that sort of stuff, you certainly often leave some of those facilities with your feet sticking to the floor and all that sort of stuff, and so maybe this will change some of that, all towards the good.
Well, speaking of those good old days, Brian, I played the clubs for 9 years, 6 nights a week. That's what I did. I was so thankful for it. And in hindsight, realize how awesome the kids today that are coming up, the younger, they would give anything to be able to do that, right? 6 nights a week playing music. And so, of course, I'm very thankful for it. And it helped me develop what it, and certainly confirm that I love this, want to be on the road and what have you. But I used to never let my band go into those rooms until I went in there and determined whether or not, the rooms were often above the bar, right? And so I would always make sure that everything was clean. And if it wasn't, I'd send the boys to a restaurant somewhere and I'd take the bedding out and go do the laundry. And I just always needed to be clean for me. And I wanted my band guys to not feel like they didn't matter to me, so always made sure things were clean. They appreciated it. Yeah.
Some of those old band houses, they put everybody in and all that sort of stuff. I mean, boy, I'll tell you, those walls could talk, and oh boy,
I'm glad they can't talk. By the way,
I can remember bringing our own pillows and blankets and our own sheets and everything else.
Hello,
oh, boy,
but what a great time as a singer in a band to be able to play 6 nights a week. I mean,
fabulous.
I think music back then, as far as bands are concerned, I mean, there's always great bands now, great performers, but lots of times now as Canadian artists, you'll do maybe a tour or you have a one-off at a festival and you may not have played together for a month or two. And you do a little rehearsal the day before, make sure everyone remembers their tunes, and you get up and you get through it. It's always good.
Yeah.
But man, it wasn't great back then. I remember going to see certain bands at clubs years ago. Always my favorite coming through town when I was in Kitchener at the Stampede Corral. I used to go see Bobby Lalonde. And he had the best band ever, and I would just go and I was just mesmerized by how great they were, and you just don't see that type of polished entertainment just on a regular. And they weren't famous, they were just bar
6 nights a week playing, right? And another band too that I loved was Terry Sumption's band, with Kenny Poe and Marie Bottrell's band with John Diamond in it, and Steve Petico, also one of the finest guitar players ever. And I still, I'm so glad that he's on Facebook, because every now and then he'll post something, and I'll always play it for my husband, because my husband played guitar for years. He did the club scene, and he when I met him, he was just moving out of the being a player full time and establishing his own business. But every time I see Steve on Facebook, I'm like, honey, you got to listen to this guy. He's just incredible. So saw some great musicians in the day, and of course, like you're saying, there's still. There's a lot of wonderful talent out there today, and these young musicians and young artists, they're fantastic. And what they would give, though, to be able to lock it in like we got to do back in the day. And of course, with my band too, we did that. We were just on the road, even with the record deal. I was looking at my schedule here, showing my husband my steel guitar player and lead guitar player, who's still with me, Lee Warren, after, gosh, we're coming up on 30 years probably now. He kept it. Thank God he did this. Now, my manager, Brian, my longtime manager, Brian, did the same thing, but Lee did it in a little more sort of concise way. Up on his website is every single date he's ever done with me since like 1990 or something. And so when I looked at that, all the shows we used to do, and we were coming up and got the record deal and traveling all over the world, and just that magic that you feel with your band when it's locked, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, there's something to be said too. I will say that we just did a Christmas tour this year, and I hadn't done it in 7 years. and I had the same players pretty much that I've done it with before and what have you. And the first night was so exciting because you're just like, wow, are we going to get through this? So there's something to be said about there's no complacency when you haven't played for a while, at least, eh?
Yeah. It's the third night you have to watch out for.
The
first is energy.
From a true musician, you're absolutely
Everyone
so
gets
true.
comfortable, and the third show just sucks.
How did I forget how did that happen? That's so. I'm gonna. That's the third night. Boy, I'll have to remind Mike. Okay, guys, remember it's the third night, so let's stay extra focused.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that was so exciting in those days. I remember those days like it was yesterday, and I wouldn't have given them up for the world, because that's what's missing today. A, the opportunity's not there like it was, and B, sometimes the desire's not there either. Everybody wants to jump into the 3,000 and 4,000 seat venues, and that's what it's going to be like. Well, that's not, in reality, that might happen for a couple of days, but the bottom line is you need that. I've worked with many groups over the years that the best thing that ever happened to them was they had that 6 nights a week in the matinees, and sometimes a matinee on Sunday too. They depend, some of those clubs in the East Coast, as you know, they went 7 days a week. There was no such thing as 6. They kept her going. And it was good. We all were better people because of it. I think that it taught us a lot. You had to have the showmanship there. If you didn't, you were sunk. You had to know everything off the top of your head, and a lot of them can't. That's why I like going down to watch the scene in Nashville these days and see those clubs down on Broadway and giving those people that opportunity. And it's wonderful. And the talent, holy God.
Yeah.
Staggering. So you grew up in the right era. We all did. It's good for us.
I do feel really thankful for that. Do you know, it's interesting. I don't know when you guys do interviews. I wouldn't mind to ask every now. I guess I don't really ask, or even hang out a whole lot with the up and comers. But a little bit though. I do some song. I just wonder what they think. How they feel. I think in a few conversations I've had, they would give anything to be out there doing what we did. So we were very lucky, that's for sure. And you know what? The thing for me too is that honestly, I think it's maybe a full circle kind of thing, but I don't care if there's 50,000 people or 5 people. I've experienced all of it, and no matter what, I'm going to show up and do my job, because I love it first off, and I know what it's like to be in an audience and to want to connect with that person and their music, whether, like I said, whether there's 5 people or 50,000, it's not necessarily about the numbers after a while. It's about understanding your job, and your responsibility is to entertain and to give that person, those people, an experience, to connect with them. And I love that. I've always loved that, and I recognize that that's really where the value is, and that's really what's important. And I've never lost sight of that,
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I look back at some of the great concerts I've seen being an audience member, and I remember walking out of them not knowing anything about the people around me because I was so locked in to who was on stage. And that just kind of proves that it could be 5 people, or it really, you feel if you've made a connection with someone, it really is you and that person in the audience. You may have that connection with a few hundred people or 1,000 people in the audience, but really for them, it's just between you and them.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember seeing Winona in concert in Vegas, a Christmas show. And I went to Vegas on my own, went to see a bunch of shows. I sat there. And I left, and I just ended up just walking around for hours because I was so mesmerized and so inspired by her concert, and she was such an open book. And it was just, I left and kind of went, "What am I doing in Vegas?" It felt like I was out of place. I shouldn't be here. There's something that was so magical about this Christmas show, and then you head out in the Strip, and it felt wrong. But I felt when I left, I don't remember anyone that was around me. Some concerts are great for that because you might be high energy, you're dancing with people next to you, you're partying, but it's those ones that you've connected with the singer or the band or the show to some degree, that it's just your personal connection for some reason. Maybe they said something, or maybe there's something that just triggered something with you. And it really is about that one-on-one connection, depending.
Magic.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Well, I have to share my Winona story with you. I mean, of course, I got to work with her through the years, but when about 1983 or so, 84, I would have to look at the date exactly. I was off the road. My mother lived in Sudbury at the time, and so I was when I would come off the road, which was so rare, I would come and hang with Mom. You know, she's come on home, Mom, and she'd cook me meals and just take care of me.
Yeah.
And I'm driving around in Sudbury, and I hear "Mama, he's crazy" on the radio, and I'm like, I really hope that girl's not Canadian, because if that girl's Canadian, like I'm my eye is on the brass ring, my eye's on the target. I'm gonna be that Canadian girl that's gonna break through here, because there's only room for one. In our population, our little country, there wasn't a room for much more than two, maybe, right? And there I am trying to find that one precious spot to be the female artist in Canada. And I heard that song and I thought, Lord, please let her not be Canadian, because if she's Canadian, all of us girls might as well just pack our bags and go home, so to speak, of course. Yeah. And I've been a huge fan. And then ironically, Chuck Thompson, who's my manager now and has been for, I guess we're going on 5 years now. He was part of the Judd's management team. He actually started out with them when he was 18 years old as their publicist. Wow. And was a part of that whole scene, you guys. And it's so fun to hear his stories. And he loved working with the girls, Winona and her mom, and from the private plane tours to the farewell tours to the everything, But interestingly enough, he said, I told him not to worry about this, but I said, don't worry, he said he doesn't want to do any more of those private plane tours anymore. And I said, okay, I'll cancel the private planes. Oh, never mind. Because, they'd leave the venue at 3 a.m, go to the hotel to get their luggage, and then get on the plane by 4 and then land at 8. And then the managers and the guys, he was exhausted all the time because he never could crawl on the bus and just go to sleep at once so apparently those private plane tours can be exhausting. So I've canceled those plans.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Feels a good price now, though. So.
Yeah, right. Darn, I did it at the wrong time.
One of my fondest memories of Michelle Wright goes way, 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 way back to a casino in Las Vegas called Bally Showroom back many years ago, when a little guy from Peterborough, Ontario, being myself, and you from Merlin, Ontario, and Darren Walters from Bright, Ontario, and John Lester from Lindsay. Here we are in this big showroom, and out comes Michelle Wright showcasing at the International Fairs and Exhibition Convention. And when I left that showroom that day, a whole new thing happened to me, where I felt no matter where you're from, what country you're from, you can go in there and stand up and do wonders, and everybody walk around that room being so proud, and you become very proud as a person too, because you're part of that. And I told that story many, many times. Darren Walters and I were having a drink in Las Vegas the night that Brian Ferryman died. Yeah. And that's the first memory we shared, was how proud Brian was walking around that room that day, and how excited he was that happened. And I never forgot that. I really haven't.
No.
Well, thank you. I sure thank you for saying that. For the listeners out there, I that may not know this, I had a Canadian manager for 28 years. We worked together, and just all our dreams came true. For some reason, we just were. I don't know. We had the same vision, and I think that's part of what's required. I think you have to see it in your mind and believe it's going to happen. And Brian and I would sit together and just, okay, well, what do you see? What are the goals? How would you like to see this happen? What do you want to wear? What's the band going to look like? I mean, we would talk about all the details, and we would believe it, because you got to be crazy I guess whether you're from Kentucky or Ontario, it's a crazy idea to dream the dream, but you got to dream the dream, and you have to see it, and you have to believe it. And so Brian and I, of course, enjoyed a lot of success together. And when I got my record deal, I actually brought my whole Canadian team down to Nashville, my band, everybody. And they all held their own. That's partly why, certainly, they get the credit for my decision in doing that, because everybody deserved the opportunity along with me. My players, it wasn't like, well, let me get rid of this band that I've had, so that I can go find another band. No, these guys put the time in with me, and we came together. And then, unfortunately, just a year and a half ago, gosh. It was a year ago, December, that Brian died from Lewy body dementia, which was the same thing that Robin Williams had. And I must say, tragically, he lost his wife, who was the business side of it. She took care of all the accounting and everything. She passed from ALS in 2014. And so then when Brian got sick, he was kind of by himself, where, his kids were. One of his daughter was here, and his son was off in Texas. But, so it was a really sad, difficult time. But, we would reminisce. Well, I took over power of attorney and took care of him. And thank God I could do it. Thank God that I wanted to, and what have you, of course. He was like a second dad to me, But in those days, before his mind kind of slipped away too far, we laughed and reminisced and smiled and just felt thankful that we had all that time together. The dreams came true,
I sure learned a lot from Brian over the years. And one of the things we would do in Las Vegas at those conventions is have breakfast together. I never forgot those days. And I really respected him and looked up to him and thought, I read your postings on Facebook when he was quite sick and you going over and tucking him in and all that stuff. And I thought, that's really something. And to have that relationship with people through this industry, a lot of people don't understand that. That's the kind of relationships you build, where you become attached at the hip, for the lack of better words, and they are like family. Everybody is, and that's what gets us through it, I think.
Well, and I have to say, my manager Chuck was so kind and so loving to me and so supportive during those times, because I spent a lot of time crying, to be honest with you, and I spent a lot of time with Brian. I'm going to get emotional, but
I think we all are.
But Chuck was so great, and I'll tell you guys, I really lucked out. Chuck Thompson, my new manager, is a friend to me and someone I love and care about as he does. I just lucked out because he's just a great guy that's seen it all, and we both sort of come, like Brian and I did, we're from the same page, and Chuck is similar. So I feel really fortunate that I was able to now to have someone like him on my side. And I've been surrounded by a lot of really good people throughout my career, and that continues, and I'm very fortunate.
And
that's great.
Fortunate to have him right from the beginning, basically. You take a look how many people who will get to a certain point and think they need to jump to another manager, or it's nice to have that consistent, because everyone grows together. It doesn't mean that your manager can't take you to the next level, because you were in the same boat together. You were both starting at the same spot, right? And if you stick together, because you understand each other, right? And everyone, then you always see a lot of artists that jump to a new management team and they think it's all going to be great. And then it doesn't end up being great. You're starting a relationship all over again, and maybe it's not the same anymore. You got to always compare it to what you had before. And it was, it's great that you two worked together for so long.
Yeah, we did, and it was lots of wonderful. It was truly like a second father to me too, So I couldn't. And then when Stu started getting sick, even though it certainly affected the business, but I was not going to walk away. Okay, good luck with this, you guys. I know you're dying from ALS now, Sue, and thanks for the last. It wasn't going to, and I wasn't going to walk away no matter what. So those things matter, ultimately more than anything. Well, what have you done for other people with your have you lost sight of what really matters and those relationships, and not walking away necessarily when things get a little tough. Now, there does come a time perhaps, but I just, hey, that guy helped me create all my dreams. So even through the low, even when things got a little, but the other thing too is because that's an artist's career. There's curves in these careers. They're not going to be just like from the time Brian and I got together. It just skyrocketed. Now, mind you, I started on the road in 1980. Brian and I started working together in 1985. My first hit wasn't a big hit, was Take It Like a Man in 1992. It was 7 years later. It's not like this stuff just happened overnight either. And so I think, when I talk to artists, younger artists, to try to let them know that, careers have... they have they'll skyrocket for a while, and then they're going to plateau, and then they're going to dip a little bit. But it's in the dipping times when I think you got to pull up your bootstraps and not lose sight. Like you as the artist haven't gotten all of a sudden not very good or something, or it's not like you don't know what, it's not that. It's just that's the career, and the fans do still want to hear your music, and people do still respect you, and you just have to don't lose sight of the craft and the music and the work that you've created, because it's still there and it's still legitimate and it still matters. And I guess I think of all the artists that came before me too. Carol Baker being one of them, by the way. I mean, I just love her, and she's out there giving her still. And there's those ebbs and those flows, and because boy, if you can't handle that, you're going to be disappointed an awful lot. So just relax when that stuff is going on. Yet don't throw in the towel, right?
Yeah. It's funny you say that. Darren and I and yourself are cut from the same cloth, obviously, because we've had long-term relationships with people. And I was reading not too long ago that one of the younger promoters / managers was talking about how you get the artist to stay loyal with you and to make sure that paycheck is there every time and they'll never leave you and you're only as successful as the last tour and all that sort of stuff. Well, I tend to totally take the opposite approach by saying we've got to stick together, thick or thin. I mean, you can't have a hit record every day. You can't have a sold out show every day either. But the bottom line is, if you're there at the beginning, you should be there at the end, unless there's some real circumstances that happen to change that. And I echo everything you say and support each and every word of it, because I agree 100%. I know Darren does as well.
Yeah.
Take me back for a few years. I brought back a few memories the last couple of days when thinking Darren and I talked about doing this. And tell me about going to places like Africa and Asia and South America and Australia, taking Michelle Wright abroad to those places. I'm always very intrigued about how you feel about going to those countries and how the reaction is there. I mean, English is not necessarily their first language in some of those places, but music seems to stand up. There's no language barrier at all. Do you feel the same way?
Yes. It's boy, the memory, just the fact that I got. I come from a town of 500 people, and the fact that I've been able to travel the world is just such a thrill to even think about. And we did all the, from Australia, as you were saying, right, to Africa, to, we did a double-decker tour, bus tour of England and Ireland and Scotland and Germany and Switzerland, and the band got to spend a day in France and in Paris, and Brian and I had to go on to Switzerland to do some media. But that music is just it brings us all together in ways that I don't know of anything else that does. It just creates a moment in time. And we ran into the Good Brothers out there when we were in England, which was fun. They come and hung out with us on the bus, and gosh, so many great memories of. and just even experiencing the culture, like breakfast in London is, and then breakfast in France. We played Moran, France, and did this big festival. I felt like I was dropped in the middle of a field in Texas. It was, I just couldn't believe it. There were 20,000 fans out there that didn't speak English, and but it works. So that's a real special thing to be able to be a part of that, to connect with people without having to speak the language.
And how different is it when you're traveling and touring than when you're traveling for vacation, right? I look at vacations and traveling around, and I love vacations, but there's such a unique difference when you're actually touring. You may not be able to get to all the spots, but man, do you get to know the people.
Yes.
In a way different way than you do when you just go on vacation.
Well, that is sort of that's kind of the upside, is that we get to go to all these places. I guess the downside is you're kind of do the show and then you're moving on the next day, right? And so that can sometimes present a challenge. And I will say, just even speaking of touring across Canada, for example. So most of the time we're traveling at nighttime, right? And so you don't really, in all those years of when we played the clubs, even it was, Saturday night, tear down, head to the next town or whatever. But a couple of years ago, I did an acoustic tour, and we were able to travel in the daytime. And just to really get a grasp, really see Canada in the daytime was so beautiful. I just was like, my gosh, what a beautiful, beautiful country. And so that's one of the things that I enjoyed. That's where I'm able to, or that's where I make sure I take the time to at least sit up, look out the window, try to take in some of what you're seeing, because it is often that we don't get to really be the tourist, that's for sure, because the singer's got to go to bed, right, and shut her mouth. And, otherwise the guys often will go out and maybe go to a local pub or something after the show. And, of course, I don't get to do that. So, I try to connect with the people in the autograph line and just make sure that I absorb some of where we're at now. And again, as you get older and travel more, I've heard artists say this before. I sort of I sort of make sure that there's time for me to just stop for a minute and take it in a bit more, because a lot of it goes flying by when you're out there at the pace that we were at when I was doing it so much.
Yeah, Brian and I, we tour a lot. And we make it a point now to only travel during the day, and not do any late nights or early mornings unless it's really, really, really necessary. Yeah. Or have conversations. So, the only way we're going to make this next show is if we leave at 4 a.m. We're always like, oh, really? Is that the only option?
Yeah.
And because you really miss, you want your sleep. You want to be fresh for the next day. And I'm not sure if it's a thing of just getting older and slowing it down a little bit. Because, I remember being younger and, you travel through the night and drive. And I was half the time always the driver because I only trusted myself. So you drive all night long, and you only thing I remember at night is if you were lucky enough to see the Northern Lights. That would be extra special, right?
Yes, dear. Oh, yes. That's
but
beautiful. Besides
that, especially if you're out west, all of a sudden you see the lights of maybe Saskatoon and the coming up, but it's still 3 hours away. So, but you can see the glow in the distance. But man, you have a long ways to get there yet.
Yeah.
But I think part of us needed that as the growing part. A lot of people don't get to experience that today, and it's something that's missing. It was better for us, I think. Now we know what we don't want to do anymore.
Yeah. Well, experiences that should never be underestimated, should it? I mean, at times, sometimes I recognize this business is so much about the youth and the younger, which is completely understandable. I was that younger, artist that was new on the scene and everybody was curious about. That was wonderful, and that is how it is. But I don't know that I would turn back the hands of time, guys. I'm quite now. There's a few more aches and pains than I care to have, but I'm still pretty high energy and still very passionate about my music, and I'm creating every week, and I'm still really driven and motivated to challenge myself and to keep being creative and get out there on the road and introduce myself to the younger generation as well. I think that's something that's really, really important. And sometimes I some of the festivals and things like that. When I was doing the festivals, they always had the new kids and the superstars, and they always had a legend of some sort that would be on the show. And as a young artist coming up, I could go watch them perform, and without fail, I learned something. I mean, from Merle Haggard to Emmylou Harris to Charlie Pride, forget about it. I did a festival here, say 10 years ago or so, and I went on just before Charlie, and after it was a festival, so I was out signing autographs kind of away so that I wasn't being distractive or anything. And he's up there just killing it, song after song after song, and I thought the festivals need to make sure they have a legend all the time, somebody who can, so the kids can see that, and what can we do about that, by the way, guys? Well, can I be in charge of the world change? Because they're not doing that at the festivals as much anymore, eh?
Well, the festival market, boy, I'll tell you, that's a little project in itself. It's a tough one, let me tell you.
Well, I think back when we used to work a lot of those festivals, you really went to see, you spent the weekend because you really were a big country music fan, and you really wanted to see everyone from the person that was on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to the person that was on at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Nowadays, it's about the party. It's about the drinking, and it's about getting to the stage when the headliner comes on. So you take a look at some of these festivals, and I remember going to the Craven and those type of festivals. They were full all day. Used to, right when the gate opened, it was a mad rush to get in, to get your spot, and people stayed there all day. Now, some of the early artists are going on. I feel really bad because there's just such a small crowd, and wait till after dinner, and then everyone kind of comes in to see the big act. And how disappointing! You almost feel like, well, why don't you just start the festival at 5 then?
Right.
But it still gives these artists a chance to play and on a big stage. And but back in the day, everyone came because they really wanted to see every single artist. But it doesn't seem to be as important anymore.
The last couple I went to, I was just as glad to get out of there. Sooner the better. And some of those parties get going on at night there, and you look around, and the one outside of town here, Havelock, they've it's that festival's been going for a long time, as you know. And I read in the paper that they have to have 100 police officers there now and stuff. That doesn't give you the warm and fuzzy feeling. And let's go down there and be part of all that,
Those kids,
exactly.
Music.
Exactly.
But it's just the change, and they're still having a great time, and it's still working. So
exactly,
but it's different than what it used to be. So,
well, I know my fan base; they're not going as much anymore for that reason. It's like it's too gotten a little out of control for them. But oh well, right? Yet they still should have legend artists every time to teach.
Well, they used to do a Sunday show in Havelock, and I loved it, from about noon hour till about 7 o'clock. And that's exactly what they did, because they wanted to encompass everybody. They'd say, look, let's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, let's go all out. We'll start this thing and blow the roof off it. But let's not forget the people that supported us all these years and all that sort of stuff. And it was great. Excellent.
Yeah.
And I
did that Sunday show, actually. Yeah,
it was wonderful. They'd have like a gospel part to start it all off, and I'm sure that's long passé by now, but it was certainly a good concept, and not sure how well it worked, but it certainly it certainly felt good and sounded good at the time. I thought.
Yes.
It all changes. So I found it interesting when I was reading that your mom and dad both were musicians. When you're growing up. So what were their involvement in music when you were young?
Yeah, country music, guys. It's just, just imagine that, we're a small town, and they played the Legions and the Moose Lodge and the weddings and, any kind of event that was going on. My mom and dad were so mom and dad were separated when I was very young. So mom had her band and dad had his band. And so whether I was with my mom or with my dad, the rehearsals with mom were Wednesday nights. Her and the band would either get together in our garage or at somebody else's house. And so I always had, and my mother was really, she had children very young. She had a very difficult childhood, and she lost her mother when she was 5 years old, and the family kind of unraveled. It was a challenging time for the family, and so mom got married young and had children young, and but she had this talent, but she couldn't really pursue it like I could, because two kids by the time 17 years old. So there's no going out there on the road pursuing a music career. But my mother was very talented, and so I had her to look up to. And then my dad, he looked like Johnny Cash, and he had his rhinestone suits, and he'd have a case of 2-4 under one arm and a guitar in the other, and off to go rehearsal or off to some place to play. And often we kids would go, and just sort of sit over in the corner. And so I was exposed to the greats of country music through my mother and father. And that's how it started for me, singing as a 5-year-old. They passed me the mic or something, and then my mother played bass, and my brother started playing guitar. And in the garage we had where Mom would have rehearsal. There was a drum set, a little PA system, and some amplifiers, and the band would rehearse there. And sort of by process of elimination, but I also was very influenced by Karen Carpenter. Oh, yeah. And so, so there we were. My mom's playing bass, my brother's playing guitar, and I just sat down behind the drums. And so my first instrument was the drums. And when in grade 7, we went and did a little musical performance. My mom and brother and I did Satin Sheets and Bobby McGee and House of the Rising Sun. And there I was behind the drums. And so that's really where. And then I moved on to guitar when I was about 13. But my parents were definitely the inspiration and the influence.
That's great.
Yeah.
What is it with moms playing bass?
What is today?
Yeah, because it always seems like there's so many moms where they're playing an instrument, they're playing bass. I'm not sure why. If you take a look back, it's not usually steel guitar or anything like that. It's bass.
Bass.
Yeah. That's
very interesting. That's a good observation, actually. And Mom also played acoustic guitar, but she was the bass player.
Yeah. So, do you remember what would be your first official Michelle Wright show? Do you remember what that was?
Well, you know what, guys? So I got my first paying gig when I was 17 as a member of a band. As a matter of fact, the band was called the Marquees, and they called the house, and I answered the phone, and they were calling about my mom. Excuse me.
That's all right.
They were calling to talk to my mom to see if she'd be interested in joining their band. Well, she was already in a band, very popular band called The Reflections. And so I said, I'll tell her, but I know she's in a band, and maybe I could come and audition. And so I'm 17 years old. Mom came home that night. She said, "Oh yeah, hon, why don't you go? Because I've got my band." And so that I got the gig, and that was sort of my first professional gig with a band. And then I moved from that band to another band called the Melody Ramblers, I believe. And I played as the girl singer in that band. And then I played actually went on the road in 1980 was the year I hit the road, always as a member of a band, like the girl singer. Yeah. And I did that until 1985. And I actually had the first contract. I signed an agency. Marilyn Caswell was the agent at the time. And she got me my first gig in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And that was and I got the contract. It was in 1985. It was my first paying gig with my name on the contract. And I even remember going around picking up the band guys and off in the van. I had a 1 ton or 3/4 ton van. Mom helped me buy the PA system, and it was just I had worked with a bunch of different bands, and it was just time for me to get my own thing going. So Mom helped me get a van and a PA system, and I had my band and went to Thunder Bay, Ontario for my first show gig.
There's a name from the past, Marilyn Caswell. Boy, I'll tell you, we used to talk almost daily, and I remember her talking about booking you all over everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, and there's someone right there, right? That's a woman who worked. She was very experienced, and she was, very well connected. She had her friends out of Nashville that she loved and enjoyed that connection that she made with them, and then all of the artists that she kept working across Canada. Marilyn was the real deal, wasn't she? And I stay connected a little bit with her. I wish I've called her on the phone a couple of times, and I almost want to call her and help her use Facebook a little bit more, because we want to connect with her, But occasionally I see her put something up there,
I feel the same way. Exactly. Yeah. We go walk a long way.
So how did you meet after that? Obviously, you connected with Brian Ferryman. So how did that connection come about?
Marilyn Caswell, once again. Marilyn and Brian were talking, and Marilyn knew that Brian was looking for a female singer. And I actually had just gone into the studio with Larry Code.
Boy.
Right, guys? Yeah. And I did Mama He's Crazy, and I did an original song that I think Larry had written. Because for some reason, somebody said, hey, you need to get a little demo tape. Maybe it was even Marilyn said, look, you need to put a little demo tape together to help me promote you. And she sent that to Brian. And Brian, responded right away to my voice and came out to see me at the Gladstone Tavern in Hamilton, Ontario. And what he loved about what I did, he said, besides the fact that your voice, he just called me an alto in a soprano world, is that I would do a lot of male vocalist songs. I'd do Merle Haggard, and I'd do because I wanted to separate myself from the girl singer that's going to be there next week and the girl singer that was there last week. So I would just do a lot of male singer songs, and he loved how I did Merle Haggard. He's like, I've never heard a girl sing Merle quite like that. So that's how my relationship with Brian started. And we went. He talked to me that night. I think the next day we had lunch at the Holiday Inn, and I said, "Come on, I want to do." And I actually knew of Brian. He was already Brian Ferryman. It's like he was managing Terry Sumption, and he was sort of becoming the manager to want to hook up with, and so we did. I still have that contract too. I've got that original. Oh yeah!
Wow.
That Brian and I signed. Yep.
Brian, he was always kind of a heavy set guy, wasn't he?
No,
I'm just kidding. I wish I had video recording of that look on your face.
So funny.
No, tall and
lanky. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was.
I can still remember going into some of those fair conventions and seeing him walking in and just basically almost having to duck under the door to get in. And
you can't miss him, eh?
Yeah, he just looked like a mad scientist. Guy coming in.
He was a mad scientist. I'm telling you right now.
He was the guy that taught me how to eat properly for breakfast and eat energy food and berries and all that sort of stuff to give me the energy you needed for the day. And I'd be knocking back steak and eggs and potatoes and God knows what else. And there he is, sitting in this little bowl of strawberries. Like, oh my God!
I know.
But he knew what he was doing. He sure did.
Yeah.
So moving on, you got a deal in Nashville. How did that all come about?
Well, it's very interesting. I have found that all things just seem to line up in a strange kind of way for me. And of course, they were lining up because I was showing up. They're not going to just fall into your lap, are they? So for example, there I was out on the road working with Marilyn. Marilyn knew about Brian looking for an artist, a female singer. Then I just happened to have just done this demo tape, and it's okay, send it. And then Brian signs the deal with me. And just shortly after that, we're playing in the Golden Rail or the Golden Spike in Ottawa. And it was Spike or Rail? Do you guys?
Rail.
It's the
Rail.
Golden Rail.
Yeah.
We're playing, right? And it's Friday night. And it was the break before the last set, and the bar manager or whatever said, hey, your agent called, give her a call back. And so Marilyn said, look, there's a gig up the road in Maxville, Ontario. The noon hour slot, the band that's playing the noon hour slot has canceled. So they need a band to fill in. I think it was about a 3-hour drive or something from Ottawa. And so I'm like, okay, because we used to go over to Hull afterwards and party till 2 or 3 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see now. That means if we do that, then we'll have to be up and on the road by 7 o'clock. And now, can we do? Like, of course, I was young, kind of. The priorities were a little different, but I thought, no, go and do this gig. And so I told the band and the boys, guys, we're going to bed early tonight because we had to get up at 7 o'clock and head to Maxville. Got there, set up, did the noon hour slot, guys. I was doing my last song. I was doing a male song by a band called Exile. Mm-hmm. Take me to the river, set me on down. Yep. Just a great song, And it was my last song. And unbeknownst to me, a guy by the name of Rick Giles was showing up there to see Gilles Godard. Gilles Godard has moved on to, be one of our most successful, managers of songwriting, publishing, this kind of thing. Has had an extremely successful career. But Gilles was an artist at the time, and him and Rick Giles were working together for writing songs and so on and so forth.
Remember this guy?
And there's a picture of Gilles.
I found that 2 days ago, cleaning. I know people can't see this. It's an old record. I sent that to him a couple of days ago.
Oh, he would love that, Yes, so Gilles Godard was this Canadian guy that was really making things happen and making connections, and one of his connections was with Rick Giles, who was an up-and-coming singer, songwriter, producer. So Rick came to see Gilles that day. He showed up backstage while I was singing my last song, and he said to us, that man up there has a very interesting voice. And he came around to the front of the stage and saw me standing there, 120 pounds, 25 years old, and singing sort of in this lower register male song. He went, oh my God, and he introduced himself to me backstage, said, I don't know if I've ever quite heard a voice like yours before. And I was, oh, thanks, And so I connected him. I had my manager in place. I connected Rick with Brian. They started talking. It was time for me to do an album. I managed to I did a talent contest where I won $10,000. Used that money. My mom helped me find an investor. We made the Do Right By Me album with Rick Giles and Steve Bogard. Met in 85, got the album out in 87. And that album got me my record deal in 1989 with Arista Records.
Wow.
It's Boy. Just and I have to share something with you guys. I had a bass player named Floyd Gibson. He was my Papa Floyd. And after gigs, him and I would go and, he was my friend only, but we would go up to his room and he had a cassette player in his suitcase of cassettes, and we'd put the bottle of Jack Daniels on the table and we'd start listening to Merle and, all of them. And he would tell me stories about their biographies, and he educated me a lot about these artists. Even though I was aware of their music, he would tell me things that he'd read about them. And one thing that Floyd Gibson said to me, which is in Hearst, Ontario one night, he said, if you can ever get a record deal with Clive Davis, you take that record deal. I looked at him kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's like 1984 or something, and I'm ever going to get a record deal with Clive Davis. And by golly, in 1989, Clive Davis opens up that Nashville record label with Tim Dubois, and I get a record deal with Clive Davis.
Wow.
It's just kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
For that Floyd Gibson spoke that out loud. And the odds of Clive Davis getting involved in country music and the odds of me signing a record deal with that guy. And once I signed my deal, I went to New York to get my hair done and get styled up a little bit and all that kind of stuff, which was kind of traumatic, to be honest with you, because they start dressing you in things you don't want to wear, and then you got to fight that fight, which is challenging, right? But I went there to meet Clive Davis, and to get to his office, it was like this circular stair thing that you climbed up to, and there he was. And as soon as I got to the top and there he was, I started crying. I said, I had my plastic Kmart cowboy boots on, and I was like, thank you so much for this record deal. And the first thing he did was pass me a box of Kleenex. That was kind of my introduction to Clive Davis. Oh, so, wow. Yeah.
It's funny how you can look back and there's these moments at the time that you don't think are pivotal moments. And you look back now and you're thinking, if it wasn't for that particular day or this little meeting here or there, how your life would completely change.
Guys, it's so true. It is certainly very true in my case. I mean, if Rick Giles hadn't showed, if he'd have been 3 minutes later, I really just don't know, right?
Yeah.
So, those sort of things definitely have happened quite regularly in my career, yeah. But you got to show up. And the point being, right, you got, show up. So that's another thing I tell artists, like, get out there, make sure you're doing stuff, make sure you're involved. Because if you don't show up, no one's going to come knocking, right?
That's Amen.
Right. So wasn't Tinty doing lights for you at some point?
She was doing lights for Vicky Van Dyke, hon.
Ah.
She was doing lights for Vicky Van Dyke, yep. And that's how I met her. She'd never done them for me, but then, of course, became very successful booking agent. She stood up in my wedding.
Yeah.
One of my dear friends. But Tinty. Yeah.
Remember her very well. Very, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have.
I don't see her much anymore. My husband and I moved out sort of a little further south of Nashville, and I don't get into town as much as I used to. And if I do, and she's not in the business anymore. I mean, if I do go to town, it's always to write. And then a couple of my friends, I sort of have this little circle of friends now that we find we don't have as much time or whatever to be out partying like we used to, I guess. And so, whereas I have a little circle of friends that I try to see at least once a month, or certainly every couple months, we try to get together. And they're all Canadians too. We have this lovely, wonderful Canadian contingency down here in Nashville, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So when you had Take It Like a Man become a big hit, what was that like for you, and how did that change your career, especially in the U.S.?
Well, my band and I were playing a club in Texas, and Take It Like a Man had been out for whatever month or two or whatever, and was just climbing up the charts. And we played it at this club in Texas, and the reaction from the audience, I mean, I know all of us were like, okay, this is kind of awesome. And we got on the bus that night and went, is that what it feels like to have a hit record coming along? Because never had we ever experienced that before, where we played a song that was just been put out to radio, and the audience was singing and dancing, and the applause afterwards. And so I really am so glad that somehow, for some reason, I remember, and the band and I stopped and went, that's what it feels like to have a hit record's bubbling under. Yeah. So that record, and it was really hard to get up. It ended up at number 8 here in America and number 1 in Canada. But we almost lost that song more times than I care to remember, because it was a hard sell. Because it was very different than one thing I don't want to be is a hypocrite, because when you're talking about the new generation and their country music, well, I was kind of kicking the doors down too a little bit. I was a bit rebellious, and I didn't want to do my mom's country music. I wanted to do my country music, and so I admittedly was also wanting to push the edges of what it was all about. And so Take It Like a Man definitely was doing that. And so we had to fight the good fight, but it to the guys, that song is now, it's 28 years ago that song came out, and to this day, and it's not credited to me particularly because anybody could have sung that song, you know. I say that. On the other hand, it's a challenging song to sing because it has the lower register stuff that I know some girls are like, I can't do that song. It's got too, you know, the lower stuff. But it was just such a hit record, and it stands the test of time. And I was the lucky one that got to sing that song. To this day, I can't wait to sing it. When I see it I know it's coming up on the set list. And it changed everything for me. Changed my whole life. Yep.
It's a fabulous song.
Yeah.
It's neat if you look back at almost any artist that's popular. They could have big hits anytime in their career, probably bigger hits than their very first hit. But it's always that kind of first or second one that stays with you forever. And you may be 20 years into your career and have other songs that blow that one out of the water, but people still want to hear that first song, right? It's that one that just kind of defines who you are.
And I'll tell you, thank God that I love doing it, because there is also that side of, there are songs that were hits for me that I won't do anymore because I really didn't want to do them in the first place, because there is a negotiation when you've got a record deal. Yeah. You know, I don't care what anybody says. You know, maybe in other formats it's different. Certainly, as a female, there, you know, you had to be a little more delicate about how aggressive you wanted to be about how you were going to do this. And also, they are putting out the money for, you know, the give and take, right? And so there's Take It Like a Man. We unfortunately, we followed up with He Would Be 16, which was another career-changing song. But then I won Top New Female Artist of the Year in America, and I was in the studio recording, and we found a song called One Good Man, which Rick Giles and Steve Bogart had written again. It's a great song, except I already had Take It Like a Man. We didn't need One Good Man, and so there was a real conflict for us. And of course, radio did the same thing. They were like, no, we've already got Take It Like a Man from Michelle. We don't need this one too. And I never really wanted to record it. And so I don't do that song anymore, for example. Though it's a really good song. I'm just glad it wasn't, maybe, I think lyrically too, I just wasn't crazy about some of the lyric, you know. I wanted one good man for all the love I have to give, to be the reason that I live, you know, wanted just one chance to find a happy ending with one good man. It just seemed really, I don't know, maybe a little more passive than I am, or although it's true, because I have one good man that I live my life for, but at the time I was young and single and thought, I'm not that desperate, you know. So I don't do that anymore.
Well, that's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with, because I think an audience knows whether you're into a song or not. I mean, it's not, if you can't connect with it yourself, how do you expect the audience going to connect with it? It's better to pull it out and just, you could put anything in its place.
Yeah. So again, thank God, I just love Take It Like a Man, and I feel so lucky to have that one. And then He Would Be 16 and Safe in the Arms of Love, and you know, songs like that I, you know, got to sing.
So looking back, when you were really going crazy there and throughout the U.S., did you have any special moments that you can think of different places you played or performed with different people that really stand out to you at this time? So many. There's just so many memories. You know, the first time I got to play with Merle Haggard was crazy. I just was such a fan. I toured with Kenny Rogers. I toured with Alabama. I toured with Randy Travis. To tour with those acts that I, you know, played their songs when I was gigging. And something I learned from all of those guys was that it starts at the top, right? They were all wonderful human beings. They treated their crew and their people right. They treated us right. I never, ever had any bad experiences with
really with anybody, quite frankly. I've not really had any bad experiences, which I guess is unusual, but watching that level and how I toured with George Strait, how they treated their people was good for me to see. You know, they're just regular folks and they were good and kind. So those are wonderful memories. Singing the national anthem at the World Series was one of my most proudest moments. That our boys were in the World Series, our Blue Jays, and I'm there singing in the middle of that incredible, stadium, singing "Oh Canada," and Winona was there. That was wonderful.
Wow.
And doing Jay Leno was really wonderful. I'd like to do that again, but just if I could just reel back that, because you know what happened, guys. So I'm there singing, having my interview with Jay, and I'm just so nervous. I really feel out of place. What am I doing here, And then I'm singing, and I've got the mic in my hand, and I'm singing "Take It Like a Man," and I twirl with the mic, and the cable gets stuck on the drums, and so now I'm afraid to pull the mic in front of my mouth, so I just kind of move over to it, and I don't want to pull the mic because in case the drums come crashing down or whatever. It was sort of so like, oh, this is not how I wanted this to be, but now it wasn't live. I could have stopped the tape and went, guys, listen, I'm really sorry. I really don't want to do this, but can I please do this again? And I would not do the twirl. I would just stay still. So experience has taught me that you could have actually stopped that tape and went ahead and started again, But Jay Leno was wonderful. And there's just a lot of stuff like that I was, oh my gosh, you guys. Also singing for the World Special Olympics. That was one of my most... a Down syndrome boy from Vancouver was an interpretive dancer. And somehow he was kind of known in that world as this guy that loved to dance. And he would just twirl around and dance. And so there we were at the Sky Dome with the World Special Olympics happening. And I'm way up top on this ramp. And I'm singing "Safe in the Arms of Love." And the spotlight hits me and I'm singing. And then the spotlight hits this young man who loves to do interpretive dance. And we were all so captivated by him. As I'm walking down these stairs and singing this song, all the focus was on him. It was so, in a stadium of 60,000 people, that's one of my most favorite memories, seeing this boy. And then he came and did that with me at my shows a few times. But just that was a beautiful memory. So there's so many of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, looking at today's music, do you have any artists that you're really enjoying what they're doing nowadays?
Yes. Madeline Merlot is somebody who I think is a star. I think she's really, for this sort of newer sound of country music, I think she's a star. Something about her that I really like. Tennille Townes, as we all know, is just killing it, right? Yeah. And I've, written with her. I've got some of my most favorite songs are that song because she's really talented, guys. She's really gifted. She's one of those extraordinary, rare breeds to come along. And I saw her when she was 16 years old. Brian and I were at the CCMAs. I saw her performing. And her pitch was out, I thought, darn it, this kid has such a magnetism about her, but that pitch, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Was it my place to say anything to her? And I just didn't feel that it was. But I was just so happy to see that she just kept developing, and her pitch now was on the money, and her songwriting is extraordinary. So I'm a massive fan of hers. Don Amaro. Don Amaro is another guy that I think is really something to pay attention to. And so just to name a few, I'm pretty big fans of those kids. Yeah. Don is a little bit older, but the others are kids. You're just getting started.
I know. It's neat seeing a nice lot of young talent coming up, right? And especially even here in Canada, there's so many. it's exciting. It's neat to see that. You always wonder what that next generation, the next cycle of singers are going to be like, and they're really coming to the table. It's pretty exciting.
Do you know what I think? I think the singing, these kids are sort of they're exposing themselves to such a wide range. My mom, when she grew up on the farm, they had no TV, and the Grand Ole Opry Sunday night. So who she was exposing, who she was singing to was sort of in this in this box. But these kids now, some of the kids I don't know what I'm like. What's the word I'm looking for? Sort of what they can do with their voices, sort of the loops and the inflections, and there's a wider range of vocal tricks going on out there nowadays, and then but they can also pull back and do a simpler sound too. I think these kids have a wider range of vocal chops, I guess, is what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think kids, their influences are so wide nowadays because they're so exposed to so many different things and so many different styles of music. I think of when I grew up, and you either listened to country music or you listened to rock and roll, or there really wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. Now, even an average country fan, they'll listen to everything. They're listening to heavy metal.
All of it.
Yeah, and all of a sudden they know a country artist, and that's not what it used to be.
Yeah, which is really wonderful, isn't it? Yet there is a consequence to all of that in every format. I mean, honestly, now I do tune. I tune into country radio pretty regularly so I can keep my finger on the pulse. And the only complaint that I would have is that things all sound a little too much alike for me. But I was just going to say that I concern myself sometimes that we are going to lose the format. And that would break my heart, because it's all starting to kind of sound like 80s pop, and just a little a little concerning. Yet on the other hand, I don't lose any sleep over it. But I just wish, because there are young artists out there, like Mo Pitty, for example, who's a great country singer. That guy is killer. And there are people out there that want to sing that real traditional country music. And I don't hear that guy on the radio. I can't believe it. He's such a great singer. So that we're losing out a little bit. So I have some concern about that, But again, you can't stop. The influences are going to be what they're going to be, as they were with me. I brought my R&B and my pop and my rock and everything to the format, but we still had all the sounds in the format. It wasn't all of a sudden now just a little less. It's a little limited now sometimes, I think. And the young kids that want to do country music don't necessarily have an outlet.
Well, it's neat that Brian obviously books Charlie Pride all over Canada, and I get to work on a lot of those shows.
Brian, I'm sorry to talk. Such a fan, Brian. And Charlie,
me too.
He has a great memory, right? And you may know that, right? And so I've done some stuff. I've done some stuff with Charlie through the years, and I got into a limousine with him one day, going to something, ACMs or something. And he started singing "Take It Like a Man," just like that. He knew who I was. Yeah. He knew the song. And then from that moment forward, I swear almost, I haven't seen him now. We did a big thing for Dick Dameron a few years ago, and I did this. So it's been a few years since I've seen him, but just like that, he's like, "It's my Take It Like a Man girl," So sorry, I just wanted to say I'm such a fan of Charlie.
Well, speaking of the memory, we did a dinner one night at one casino for some players and stuff. There's about 30 people at this dinner, and he went around the table and asked everybody for their name. And about a half hour later, he went around the opposite way and named everybody. And it just freaked everybody right out. And he remember your horoscope and when you were born and what that means. It's just, the guy is just incredible.
And I agree with you. Exact opposite. But I do not forget a face, though. I'll tell you, I do have sort of a little gift, I think, for remembering faces. Sometimes fans at my shows will be, how did you remember that we met? I don't know. You lock eyes like that, and I just don't forget. But yeah.
Well, I got a very special memory that goes back probably to, let's say, 1993, maybe somewhere around there. I booked the entertainment with John Lester for the Lindsay exhibition when John was the manager there. And they always book their entertainment about 7-8 months ahead of time. And we're having this meeting and whatnot. And Michelle Wright's name come up. And we talk about it. And anyway, to make a long story short, we agree that's the artist that we're going to have on there at this particular fair, which is the third week of September. Well, as we all know, the CCMAs happen to be the first week of September. And guess who won all the awards that night? A lady by the name of Michelle Wright. And I'll tell you, we never seen such a crowd at that fair in all of our life. And what was really neat about the whole thing, at the end of the entire evening, they come up to us and said, you know, you really know how to pick that talent to fill our grandstand. I got thinking, I agree, you know, and we worked together for 20 years after that. And I attribute a lot of that to that success that you had there that night. It was overwhelming. It was jammed like I've never seen anything jammed at a fair in my life ever. It was great. So,
you know, I have those memories too. The Canadians, you know, the interesting thing sometimes when we talk about, well, why does a Canadian have to leave and go to Nashville, you know, and the bottom line is that we just at that time anyhow didn't have the infrastructure, not you know, to promote a Canadian artist, like, you know, because it costs a lot of money to put an artist out there on the main stage like that, and to hit time and time and time again until you can penetrate sort of the, you know, the psyche of anybody, because we're all busy, you know. And so, but I want to tell you that once I did hit in America, and they you know, had me on Jay Leno, you know, that's how you can, you know, that makes people aware of you. Once Canada became aware of me, the Canadian fans, I would not have survived without the Canadian fans, because they started showing up in numbers that nobody had seen. And it was so exciting for me. It was magical, you know, and I was just so blown away. I was like, Canada does support their own, but they got to be aware of you in order. It's not that they don't. They got to know who you are, and once they know who you are, by golly, there's a pride. There was a pride in all of that was going on for me and for the fans. That was so beautiful.
Excellent. Well, I know we've taken a lot of your time here, and it's been a great conversation. I always like to wrap up with a couple questions. One question is always, what has been your place that you've never performed at before, venue or city or place in the world that you've always wanted to but you haven't yet? Is there one on your bucket list that you like to strike off one day?
Gosh, I think of some place in, Lord, let me think about that. You know, the Bridgetown. Okay, two places, guys. The Ryman in Nashville. I was just there to see a show. My brother-in-law's in a really cool band called Calexico, and they were there. I'd love to play the Ryman, and I'd love to play the Bridgestone Arena here in Nashville. But of course, I was also thinking about like the Parthenon or so, like in Greece. You know, you see where those beautiful, you know, performances that go on in some of those. Something like that would be amazing. But those are a couple of places that come to mind.
They're good ones.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how the Ryman always seems to come up with a lot of people. The Ryman or the Opry. There's a couple that always the ones. You know, there's special.
And I've played the Opry. And why? You know, I'm not sure how come fate has not allowed me into the Ryman yet. But by golly, I'm still seeing it. I'm believing it. I've got the vision. It's going to happen.
Another question: if you had to look back over the last bunch of years, is there anything you feel like if you wanted to change and do something different besides the Jay Leno show appearance, would there be something that you'd want to change and do over again?
You know, that is such a good question, because there are a few things. You know, you know, I was pitched. You know. Early in my career, too, I was pitched a song called Maybe It Was Memphis, which is a massive, wonderful, Pam Tillis had a huge hit with that. And that was pitched to me. And I was Canadian, and I hadn't been to Memphis before. And I hadn't read a Faulkner novel, which is some of the lines in this song. And so I passed on it. And I remember, you know, the team kind of going, but they respected my position is I'm Canadian and I've never been to these places and I don't connect with the song. Or then There's Your Trouble. The Dixie Chicks had a big hit called There's Your Trouble, And I didn't like the song because it seemed like it was a girl bitching about another girl. Well, there's your trouble. And I just didn't want to be the girl pointing out to a guy how he shouldn't be with that girl and he should be with me because she's just a bitch and I'm not. And it's just something but it's a great song in hindsight, So sometimes, if I could maybe have changed those decisions but I couldn't because that's where I was at the time. But I also think though, that to me is I could give you guys 10 things that I should have done differently quite easily. But then on the other hand, I guess I just didn't know any better. To me at that time, those were the right decisions. But in hindsight, I maybe should have made. The other thing is following your intuition. Following your instincts, It's so easy to get talked out of something because the person's trying to do the best thing for you, but they're not inside of you. They don't feel what you're feeling. And a couple of times that I should have followed those intuitions a little closer. But it just doesn't work. It can't be done perfectly.
No.
None of us do perfectly, right?
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I used to say that I trust that everything is as it should be. Yet, on the other hand, when Sue died from ALS, I'm thinking, well, why did that have to be like, and Brian struggling with Lou and some of the other things I've seen in my life, it's like, well, I'm not sure that things are exactly as they should be. I don't really use that expression the same way anymore, but I'm happy. My life is good.
Great.
And so,
that's the main thing.
How it goes, eh?
That's right.
And
you can't buy happiness, and it's good.
Yeah.
And especially in wrapping it up in times like we're going through now, to be happy and content with where you're at. It's all you can hope for, right?
Well, and I have to say, I picked very well when I married. I had some long-term relationships, in my life, but never got married for whatever reason. But I'm so glad I waited. I married Marco, and I've been together almost 20 years now. And quite honestly, guys, again, without him in the lean years, he's there for me. He's like, I'm going to just keep going and don't worry. And he's a wonderful love of my life and kind and funny and generous and understanding. And
I heard he makes great spaghetti sauce.
The best.
Good.
So I'm a lucky girl. Not to nothing's perfect in anybody's life or world, but I sure am surrounded by some wonderful people, and I'm very, very lucky.
That's
wonderful.
Awesome.
Well, it's certainly great to chat with you again. It's been a long time.
Well, we'll have to have breakfast together sometime, Brian. And
Perfect.
I might. I don't eat meat, but I could. If I did, I'd have steak and eggs to heck with that. Brian and his bowl of blueberries, and we'd have a little toast to Brian and go, who cares about blueberries?
There you go. Oh, great. Love it.
Well, thank you very much again. It was a lovely conversation, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And
I would love for us to have. Hopefully, we can all have a cup of coffee together sometime.
Lovely.
It's so nice
Lovely.
just to see you guys.
Well, Brian
Brian
and I have talked about coming down to Nashville to do some podcasts too, and obviously with times now, it's not allowing us. But if we get down, we certainly will touch base and love to get together.
Please do, yeah, because we could go have a toast together. Do you guys ever watch the Dan Rather and the Dan Rather interview?
You bet.
Love it, right? Those bands that it's just so great. Eh? I love that show.
He did the best interview with Charlie Pride I've ever seen in my life ever. He was just wonderful with him.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, guys.
Take care.
I'm going to go get my toothbrush out again because I got more cleaning. I'm giving the house the toothbrush clean. I'm moving out of the master bedroom into the kitchen living room now. So
perfect.
Well, take care, Michelle. It's great to see you.
Guys, okay?
You too.
Everybody's safe, right?
Take care of yourself.
Are you guys like doing the full distancing thing? I mean,
Yeah.
We're miles apart.
I haven't been to Starbucks in a month. I'm dying.
Wow.
We've been quarantined.
I was going to the grocery store with mask on and stuff like that, and I would go to Home Depot a couple times to get some stuff. But for these next 2 weeks, I'm going to stay totally quarantined. Yep.
This is week number 3 for us, so I'm used to it. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these 2 weeks are important weeks to really, really, really buckle down.
Feels like it is, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, fellas.
Okay, take care.
We'll
see you again.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye.